Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so about a week ago now, Majority Report did a segment about Michael Tracey, who has been going around impugning the credibility of Epstein's accusers, all of the girls that have accused Epstein, the general premise of accusations against Jeffrey Epstein, and seeming to kind of defend those accused. Now, it's on a very particular basis that he's doing it, essentially saying that the media narratives about Epstein are exaggerated, but goes as far as basically saying that the only thing that we know to be true, that we know Epstein to be guilty of, is what he was proven in court to be guilty of the first time. And he even has criticized that as being too harsh of a punishment instead of criticizing it for being a sweetheart deal. So he essentially is trying to question the entire premise of the narrative of the enormity of Epstein's crimes and all the different people that were involved. So he appeared on Piers Morgan and had this weird moment where he was asked if he was paid by any of the accused in this case to trot out these defenses that are similar to the defenses that were trotted out by Epstein's lawyer. And he had a weird moment where he suddenly couldn't hear the mic. So Majority Report reacted to that with a little bit of personal context added from Emma Vigeland about times that she's met him before in working at TYT, and he responded to the whole thing. So this is kind of a few different clips intertwined. First, I'll show you some of the clips of the Majority Report segment and the Piers Morgan segment, and then go into Michael Tracey's response.
Michael Tracey, I'm just going to put this out. He's got an issue with women. It's pretty apparent. It was apparent when in my interactions with him. It was apparent because he lost his job at Vice initially for doxing Lena Dunham because he was angry about her Hillary support and proved that she didn't vote in the New York primary or something like that, and ended up posting her address. Here he is on Piers Morgan, and this is Tara Palmieri, who's become, I think she's independent now as a journalist, and they have this interaction where she asks him straight up, are you being paid by someone associated with Epstein? And I won't spoil how this goes.
Let me give the final word to Tara because he
what
keeps.
Conspiracy theory did I postulate?
When he's not lecturing. When he's not lecturing.
Michael, good job dressing up for the occasion, buddy.
You still look way too greasy and wet.
Very wet.
Like,
Are you being paid by any of the men who've been accused by Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm having trouble hearing right now. I wish I could respond to whatever nonsense she just blurted out.
I'm asking you if you have ever been paid by any of the men who have been accused of crime.
Maybe somebody can
astonishing coincidence that you suddenly lost your hearing when you were asked a very difficult question. Tara asked if you're being paid by anybody to smear the victims of the Epstein
rather than
scandal.
defend the merits of her journalistic output, which she can't because it's indefensible, what does she do? She tries to impugn me personally, tries to imply or
you're not answering.
What's the answer to the question?
Of course I'm not being paid by
This
anyone.
clip was going around because Michael Tracey has this weird slip up where he suddenly can't hear and he can't answer that question. So after throwing a couple accusations out in the absence of an answer, he then quickly and outrageously gives the answer. No, of course I'm not being paid. It kind of seems like a tactic, and he does that throughout this video that he does in response, and essentially he responds a little bit to the substance, but his point is that Majority Report is only attacking him on this personal basis, and it's only about this idea of his appearance or the fact that Emma Vigeland says he clearly has a problem with women, and that was clear when she met him. So he, in responding to this, literally cannot get through longer than like 5 seconds of them talking without responding to every little tiny word that they say. It's incredibly tedious, which is a a word that he used to describe the original video about him because he views the personal attacks in his mind as being tedious. But the result of the way he chose to respond is just the most petty thing. He is taking the bait on every single petty insult that the Majority Report no doubt throws in there. They're roasting him, and they're doing what they do, which is trying to mock people who should not be taken seriously in the public eye, even though they are. And Michael Tracey is one of those people, especially in this case. He has been for a long time, and he has suddenly emerged out of nowhere to be the premier smearer of Epstein defenders. That is just the role that he is fulfilling, even if he views it as a righteous role to say people are over-exaggerating and mythologizing, as he puts it, about Jeffrey Epstein, and so there needs to be critique of that narrative. Either way, he has emerged in a way that he hasn't in years by talking about this issue. So here's him responding to the Majority Report real quick.
I always recall having pretty pleasant interactions with her on the rare occasions that I would. I went out of my way to be nice to these people pretty much. But when you enter into this domain of the YouTube gossip fest, none of that matters anymore. And then they try to tie in some kind of vague personality critique. I am not interested in anybody who cares to critique my personality. You're not my mother, you're not, and even her, I'm fed up with on that stuff. Although she doesn't even, actually, to come to think of it, she doesn't even critique my personality. But if my mother wants to give me some kind of personal advice on something, then I'll listen out of a paternal obligation, right? But this random woman, what? Fine. I mean, people say all kinds of stupid stuff on the internet. Of course, it's not true. I mean, as I could give you plenty of personal testimonials to verify, okay? But I expressly, of course, stated that I'm not paid by any co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein, you total nincompoops, and that I additionally said to Tara that I'm paid by my readers on Substack, just like presumably she is. How come Tara Palmieri never has to explain who she's paid by?
But we don't know where his funding is coming. He's a so-called independent journalist. I mean,
where's your funding coming from? I'm somehow under this this obligation to be maximally transparent about where I get my funding from. I tell people it's from Substack. I do occasional freelance contributions for newspapers and so forth, like the Wall Street Journal today, other places. It's not that complicated.
A famed Harvard law professor, Alan Dershowitz, met with Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office and provided damaging information about teenage girls who they say gave his client, Palm Beach billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, sexually charged massages, according to police.
The funny thing about this is that there's such a voluminous quantity of Epstein files out now that if they had the wherewithal to do just a smidgen of actual research into the files that I guess they were clamoring for, they wouldn't have to read some old Palm Beach Post newspaper excerpt. Yeah, he did copy her, one of the initial 14-year-old who lied about her age at the behest of, at the direction of Haley Robson, and said she was 18. They did pull her MySpace, and there was some stuff on there that they said should call into question her credibility. I'm just saying that if there was any actual journalistic effort applied here, they could pull up the primary source documentation, but instead, they do the most lazy Google possible and find this ancient Palm Beach Post little excerpt.
The case originally was going to be presented to the grand jury in February, but was postponed after Dershowitz produced information gleaned from the website myspace.com showing some of the alleged victims commenting on alcohol and marijuana use. So this whole thing of, and it's very interesting that Tracey mentions Dershowitz by name. I'd be curious, do you have any association with Alan Dershowitz?
I mean, do these people even have the basic capacity to comprehend in what context I was mentioning Alan Dershowitz? It was in the context of me saying that Virginia Roberts-Giuffre had recanted her claims against Dershowitz, in addition to two other people who I also mentioned, John-Luc Brunel and Stephen Kosslyn.
Okay, so the main thing that emanates from Michael Tracey, and excuse my language, I'm going to try to keep it on paper with my critiques here, because he whines and complains about how personal they make it, and they're just insulting him, and this thing about him having issues with women, which he kind of proves by going into this weird thing about his mother, saying his mother's the only one who's allowed to criticize him that way, and I'm even sick of hearing her shit. But matter of fact, she doesn't even critique me on person. Like, what are you even talking about, bro? Like, that's not how an adult talks about these sort of things. And I get it. She said something mean about you, and clearly there's an emotional reaction there, but there's no self-awareness of the fact that she picked up on something about you that is a common thread through everything you're saying now about the Epstein accusers. And that's the main thing that I want to point out here, to try to provide some clarity, if I can, instead of just taking shots, is that the way it comes off when Michael Tracey is doing what he's doing, first of all, seems like a completely untenable position. You're trying to chip away at people's confidence in things that we already basically know to be true. And when you say that Epstein, for example, was only convicted of procurement of sex with a minor with a couple underage girls, and one of them was overage and the other one lied about her age. She was 14 at the time. And what Michael Tracey's trying to do is build out this narrative that essentially they were all lying to some extent, or that their lawyers lied and created this mythology of Jeffrey Epstein, and that they ultimately lied in order to get better settlements. That's essentially what his claim is. And the thing is that is exactly the defense of Jeffrey Epstein at the time, and that was the mounting defense that was going to be used if he had went to trial, which he never did. And that's a huge part of this, is that we don't know what he would have been convicted of that second time. And we know that it was a light deal the first time. He took a deal, and there were essentially more girls involved in that incident that he did not get charged for. And that's always how this stuff goes down, especially with powerful people. They get watered down sentences because they're able to negotiate it down. So not being able to see that, and not being able to see how defending that, using the same defense that Alan Dershowitz used in defense of Jeffrey Epstein when he was still alive, the fact that you're saying a lot of the same things now, even though he's dead, and still levying those same defenses, it comes off very strange. It comes off like you're trying to protect someone, and it does raise the question of whether you have some kind of financial association with Alan Dershowitz. So if this is your thing, and you feel like you're right about this Jeffrey Epstein stuff, and there's nothing weird about what you're doing, then you should come out and dispel the critics by saying, this is proof that I'm not taking any money through Substack from Alan Dershowitz or anybody else. You should provide some receipts on that, because your behavior makes it seem like you are. Even if you think that's unfair and you think you're right about this, you've appeared from nowhere with an argument from Alan Dershowitz back in Palm Beach, and the criticism that Matt Leck shouldn't be using an article back from when this was originally being spoken about, when Alan Dershowitz's legal tactics were being written up in a newspaper in Palm Beach at the time. That actually bolsters his case better and shows that what you're doing is something that Alan Dershowitz has been doing for a long time. And that is also confirmed in the Epstein Files. So even if you think you're righteous, that 100% brings up the question of whether you have some kind of legal association, because there's no reason to defend Jeffrey Epstein on this legal basis any longer. There's a huge and enormous preponderance of evidence that's never even been looked at in court. And that's part of the outrage behind this whole case. So ignoring all of that just makes you come off as though you have some type of issue with the survivors, and that you're motivated in some way by impugning them, which Alan Dershowitz also appeared to be motivated by impugning them, and very effectively has utilized that as a tactic to intimidate people into retracting their accusations of him and engineering their statements after the fact to exonerate himself. This is the pattern we've seen with Epstein and Dershowitz, and that is documented in the Epstein Files. And yeah, I mean, it's just true that there has to be somebody who's going to come out and trot out that defense. The question is why? Is he just doing that because of opportunism, or is he doing it because someone is paying him to do it? It's a fair question. It is a fair question, whether you want it to be or not. It's fair to ask whether he's getting paid to do this, because it's making you look really bad. The fact that you don't see that it makes you look really bad to make these arguments, and that you should go out of your way to not look like the greasiest guy on a panel because you're making an argument that comes off as incredibly greasy. So the lack of self-awareness there is part of, I think, the genuine problem here of Michael Tracey, even if what he's doing is dishonest. He's genuinely won't allow himself to see the way all of this comes off. And that's what makes it believable that you might have had an interaction that you thought was completely normal and passing with Emma Vigeland, where she got the impression that you have some type of issue with women. I completely believe that. So that being said, I mean, that is the pettier aspect of this. We'll see if Majority Report responds. I don't believe they did on Monday. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. Maybe when they do another day when Sam's not there, they'll respond, because that's what the show was on this day when they spoke about it. So we'll see. They may just not feel like Michael Tracey's worth responding to on this. The video itself doesn't have many views, although I will say he has more support in the comments than I would have thought. So there does seem to be some merit to the fact that he has like a Substack following, even though, again, I hadn't heard anything from him since years ago at this point. But he has a fair amount of support even on this stuff, so it's possible that he'll continue being prominent. But even in the case of Piers Morgan, you know, everybody just seems sort of disgusted by what he's doing. It kind of reminds me of Candace Owens doing like a documentary about Harvey Weinstein and how he was innocent, basically making the same exact case, that it's all exaggerated and they're all just trying to get higher settlements and blah blah blah. It's an argument that's there to be made by someone who is soulless and disgusting. And I mean, you know, anyone who wants to do that can do it. But I think you can look at Alan Dershowitz and see what that does to your reputation and your soul. So anyway, last thing I'll update about, I guess, is these newer accusations against Trump, just because it ties in with all of this stuff. And this is basically fleshing out of previous things that we had sort of heard glimmers of. There's been little stories here and there of Trump being accused of assaulting a 13-year-old with Jeffrey Epstein in various contexts. Now, I think there might be a couple stories about this, a couple accusations. At one point, an accusation was made in court that was then recanted, that Donald Trump had raped her with Jeffrey Epstein, a 13-year-old girl. Now, I do not know. I believe it was a Jane Doe in that document. I do not know if that's the same girl who is now, documentation is coming out, was interviewed by the FBI multiple times. So this girl said that Trump raped her in some kind of mysterious circumstance, that, you know, Jeffrey Epstein was involved, and she had a story about it, but it's not exactly clear where or why Trump was there or how it fits into this broader story. But these interviews panned over a significant amount of time, as well as her story did, and she ultimately came to the conclusion that none of this was worth it and decided to not pursue it any further. As well as the FBI, I'm not sure if they didn't see anything to pursue, although some of these interviews were taking place while Trump was president the first time. So they were pursuing this, and they viewed her to be credible enough to continue pursuing this story and wanting to get the full scope of it. And it appears Trump and his Department of Justice withheld a lot of these documents, specifically about these interviews and the credibility of this witness. And so there's probably more stuff like that that's being withheld. And I think people are still grappling with this a little bit. But these type of solid accusations against Trump, even if you can still pick them apart, the likes of Michael Tracey, but I think the pressure is mounting specifically on this story, a specific story of Trump and wrongdoing with Epstein. It's my opinion that a lot of Trump and Epstein's relationship played out at a time before most of this documentation was being collected. I don't think they were that close at the time of a lot of what's being released in the documents when he was talking to Steve Bannon and some of the more sophisticated aspects of his operation. I think in Palm Beach, he had sort of a different operation going on with Mar-a-Lago that sort of came to an end around the time period that we started getting documentation in this recent Epstein Files release. So that could be a matter of what was being gathered by the FBI, or it could be that specifically documentation from before that implicates Trump even more than this recent tranche of documents that references him like a million times. But there could be more direct references to him that were collected at an earlier time, and who knows if records from that time are ever even collected. It seems like Donald Trump is pretty notorious about keeping his communications off record. So there's probably more documentation like this from investigations that they did at the time, and we do not know these accusations to be true, but it's clear that the pressure is mounting there, and it's clear that a lot of accusations like this have popped up that were squashed by similar tactics to what Alan Dershowitz did to defend Jeffrey Epstein, and and exactly what Michael Tracey is doing now, impugning the credibility of these girls that in some cases were selected to be able to use leverage against them, just like they do with more powerful people, so that these girls are more likely to stay quiet. And you threaten them and you intimidate them, and there are direct accusations of Trump engaging in that type of intimidation to get people to be quiet. I think the pressure will keep up on that, and we have to keep the pressure up on that because there's got to be more when it comes to that specifically. And it seems like if there's documentation of Trump seriously doing something wrong that they have, it's going to get more and more impossible for them to keep it hidden.
Me too close to, too much to do. The mission is too crucial. Shout it out from the rooftops until I lose vocals. Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity.